All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to another edition of Deconversion Stories. And today I'm talking with my friend Mike Lynn, who is going to be telling us a little bit about how he found his way out of religious belief. And we're probably going to talk a little gaming towards the end of here too, because he's a gamer and he's got a Twitch channel. And I have that in the link below, or in the description box below. There's a link for that. And also to follow him on Twitter as well, if you'd like to do that. So Mike, basically what I do here is I talk to people about their journeys away from their previous beliefs, whatever they may be. So why don't you kind of take us back to the days when you were still in that sort of a belief system and how you slowly found your way out of it and into becoming the atheist that you are today.
So my parents are, my mom's an Italian and my father is German and Polish. His Polish side is Catholic, and obviously my mom, being Italian, was Roman Catholic. So I was brought up in the Roman Catholic tradition, and the church that I attended was slower than other Catholic churches in my area even.
What do you mean slower?
Slower in the sense of slower to come up with, to bring itself more in line with scientific knowledge of the day. So my church was, at least at the time when I attended this particular church, was creationist. It was young earth. So when my parents always put a value on my education, so I went to a private school. It was non-denominational, so it wasn't sectarian. It was just a standard private school. Didn't really do much about religion, so because of that, like most other Catholic parents, if your kid doesn't go to Catholic school, they send you to CCD. So I was going to CCD most nights of the week. I'd come home from school, do a little bit of homework, then get ushered off to CCD when my mom or dad came from work for like an hour or two, depending on the day. And that's when, that at least during my time in CCD, was when I got a lot of the indoctrination put into me. I was taught that, everyone that exists today are basically descendants of Adam and Eve, and they were the first humans, and Eve came out of Adam's rib, and the earth was 6,000 years old, and
and they believe this.
I believed it. I was a little kid. I didn't know any different. My school was very, at least at the time, was at my beginning stages, was very like, our science classes were very hyper introduction, like I would assume most younger student science educations are. And I didn't really start getting into the notion that the earth was, many times older than 6,000 or 7,000 until I was, maybe 8 or 9. But that wasn't where the initial contradiction started. The initial contradiction started was because the church, for whatever reason, decided to move from a creationist teaching to a more ID teaching, intelligent design teaching. And I was at least conscious and aware enough to realize that you were telling us that the earth is 6,000 years old. Because I was about 7 or 8 at this time. I remember being taught that the earth is 6,000 years old. Now I'm being told that it's, millions and millions of years old. I was being told that we came from, to humans 6,000 years ago in the Garden of Eden, to, well, God created this process of evolution and kind of intelligently guided it along. And
yeah.
that didn't really resonate with me. they tried to explain it away, but their explanations were very just like, we became more wise in God's word, and I was just like, okay, but that still didn't really answer my question. And then I ended up having, I when I was 9, I was diagnosed with a neurovascular disease called moya moya, and basically what that does is the carotid arteries in your neck close. You have to have a brain surgery, and they basically redirect blood flow through things that I don't understand. But I get adequate blood flow to both sides of my brain now, so they did something right, I assume.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, that's about the time where my parents kind of stopped going to church every weekend. I never really asked them why, though I was curious, but at the end of the day, I was kind of just happy not to have to get up early on a Sunday. I was kind of excited to just stay home. And then it was this was about the time where I didn't know what it was called at the time, but I now know that at the time I was struggling with the problem of evil. Like, if God loves me, why would he give me this? Like, I remember having to literally relearn how to walk, how to talk, how to write, because of the brain surgery that I had. And I just could not wrap my head around, and I was still going to CCD on and off because it's about the time where I would have gotten my first communion, and it was really important to my mom that I get my first communion. And I kind of asked the teachers that, and I'm sure you could assume that what the answer that I got was, which was God works in mysterious ways. And
the cop-out answer, yeah.
Yeah, he had, it may seem bad, but there's an ultimately good purpose for it. And I was just kind of like, I was basically just thinking, well, he's still kind of an asshole for it. Like, I don't really understand how that justifies him giving me this, but I kind of went along with it. And then my parents started going to church again and taking me along with them. In maybe a year or so after that, except they weren't going to a Catholic church. They were going to a non-denominational Christian church, also in my area. And it was like light and day. I don't want to say the beliefs, but like because the Catholic Church's emphasis, at least mine, was, ensuring that you're right with God, ensuring that you are carrying out God's word and avoiding this eternal damnation, because God loves you and he wants you to be with him for all eternity, and if you do anything that he doesn't like, then, well, he's going to just punish you forever and ever until the end of time.
Right. Infinite punishment for a finite crime. Yeah.
Exactly.
That seems justified.
Yeah. And my father was, and still is, a huge fan of George Carlin.
Me too.
And I always watched it with him, and he and I would crack up. And I remember George Carlin's skit where he talks about that, and he's like, and he's going to put you in this place forever and ever. You're going to burn and choke and be tortured in anguish forever and ever until the end of time. And then he looks up and goes, but he loves you.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment, this was about the same time where I was kind of like, it started to click in my head that this actually doesn't make sense, and it's not just me that thinks that way. Because at the time, pretty much all of my friends, well, not pretty much all of my friends were religious to some degree. Maybe they weren't necessarily all Catholic, but they were all Christian, like some form of denomination Christian. And I just started questioning myself, except I ended up not going to the pastors I never finished the other thought. Sorry, I got sidetracked. But the new church was more focused on like the life of Jesus and love everybody and be good to people. And as long as you're a good person, he's not going to torture you. Whereas the Catholic Church was, if you do anything that we tell you God doesn't want, which even if you think that's good, if he doesn't like it, you're still going to hell. Like a thing that stands out in my head was lying.
Yeah.
I was always taught by the Catholic Church that lying is categorically bad. It's bad in every scenario, no matter what. You should never ever lie.
Wonder if that includes omitting information.
Well, I went to law school, so omitting information and lying are two different things to me.
Yeah.
But I can at least understand how some people can view a lie by omission as still a lie. But my problem with it was, at this time, I had always loved to read, and even at the time when I was still a Catholic and we were still going to the Catholic Church, I enjoyed reading nonfiction. I always read at a reading comprehension significantly ahead of where I was educational-wise. So I had read things about, at this time I was fascinated with war and the history and what got us into war and stuff, and I was at least familiar with the story of Anne Frank.
Mm-hmm. And I grew up with it drilled into my head, growing up as a Jew. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot that you grew up as a Jew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was born to Christians, but I was raised as a Jew.
Yeah.
All part of God's plan.
Yeah. Exactly. All part of God's plan. And I had asked the teacher, the teacher of the CCD class. He wasn't really a teacher. I don't know what his profession was, but he was the person that volunteered at the Catholic Church to teach the CCD course that I was in. And I had asked, well, if I am in the house that Anne Frank is hiding in, and the Nazis ask me if I'm hiding someone in my attic, do I have to tell the truth? And without hesitation, without thinking about it, he just said, absolutely, you have to tell them that you're hiding people in your attic so that they don't get sent to their certain death. And I was just appalled at that. Yeah. That's when I was just like, I'm done. I was just like, this absolutely doesn't make sense. I'm not okay with this. And so I continued going to Catholic CCD class for quite some time until my parents decided to stop paying for it for whatever reason, because the Catholic Church likes to price gouge you for everything. You have to pay for everything. And we were attending this non-denominational Christian church type of thing. And I was reading more and more about science because of this conversation with this CCD teacher. And I just wanted to see what I wasn't being told.
Right.
And that's when I read all about evolution, all about
all of it.
Well, not all, but
a good understanding is what you garnered from it.
Yes, because as a full disclaimer, when I say all with regards to anything biological, take it from someone whose only physics training has been an honors bio class in high school, and that's it. It was at that point that I decided that I didn't have the stomach for dissection or anything else like that, and I was not that. I was more chemistry and physics oriented,
Chemistry.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I loved my chem class, but I was going to be a chemical engineering major. That's what I decided that I wanted to be when I was in high school.
Cool.
And then my honors Chem 2 class, my teacher really liked organic chemistry.
Yep. It's a good one.
And we did it. And however it was, whether it's the way she taught it, I was like, nope. And I ended up not being doing anything chemistry related. But going back,
You ended up in law. See, I don't even then see the connection there.
Well, you see, I started in college. I started out as a computer science major, and I was going to minor in physics and political science.
Okay.
Because I originally wanted to major in political science, but then I was like, I don't know. What if I get into law school and I don't like it? What if I don't get in? Do I want to go to graduate school? I didn't know that at the time, so I figured I'll just play it safe because I enjoyed coding. I love math. I love physics. I enjoyed coding. I'll just major in comp sci. Started it, decided that that's absolutely not what I wanted to do for 8 hours a day at least, and swapped to major in political science, went on to law school, and now I'm finished law school, graduated, thankfully, and now I'm getting my master's degree in philosophy, and I plan on getting a PhD in philosophy. So I've been all over the place.
Oh, good for you. Awesome. Yeah, seriously. It's like some OCD schooling going on there.
Yeah. So while I was attending the Catholic CCD classes and going to this Christian church, I was reading the science books. I remember reading The Blind Watchmaker.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, it was. And then a couple of years later, I ended up reading God Is Not Great.
Got it right over there.
Yep. My wife and I, we moved to where we're living now about a month ago. I still haven't unpacked all of my books because I have a huge plastic case of just case books from my law school.
Wow. Cool.
And then I have another thing of just the important books that I have read or intend to read that carries some level of personal significance to it, like The Blind Watchmaker. Actually, The Blind Watchmaker is one that I have out right over there right over there on my nightstand. Sorry, forgot I moved it. But I was reading all of these books, and it was comforting, I guess you could say, to realize that there's more people than me that think this way. And through these books and just thinking about it more and more, I was coming further and further out of religion, and that was pretty scary to me because that's all I had known. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, we had changed back from in 7th or 8th grade. We had swapped back from the non-denominational church back to another Catholic church that was separate from the one that I had been going to when I was younger. So mm-hmm. They again have, well, with Catholicism, there's some form of universal teachings, more or less, mm-hmm. but mm-hmm. depending on the priest or the priests at your church, there's still some level of subjective interpretation,
of course,
with that. So it was
like that for me too. Growing up with the rabbis, different synagogues around the city.
Yeah,
same thing.
Yeah, and it was just that, because I was always taught that the Bible is inerrant. Everything in the Bible is good and true.
Don't believe them.
Yeah. So, and I believed that, but then it also contradicted to me logically, because if it's all true and objectively so, how can there be so many different subjective interpretations of what it says in there? So it was at this time that I did the one thing that they don't want you to do. And I actually went and I read the entire book for myself without any form of, priest or minister or any type of guidance on to explain away, say, the position on slavery, which, by the way, was never taught to me in any of the Bible study courses.
Really?
Yeah, that was
They
never.
just didn't talk about it, or they didn't bring it up, or
pretended it was not in there. So when I came across that passage in Exodus, I was just like,
what the fuck?
Yeah, pretty much. I was just like, I had absolutely no idea that this, what I would assume everyone in the modern age would agree is abhorrent, or at least I hope everyone would agree is abhorrent.
Well, if you think about the way it is a little bit nowadays, especially in the U.S. right now, there's probably some that don't think that. Unfortunately,
God.
Some humans just won't evolve.
Yes. Yeah. Politics in the U.S. As a political science major and someone with a law degree, and it's just so painful to me.
Oh, I bet.
Like,
oh yeah, in general, I think it is. Yeah.
It's like I have a couple of friends, and I say a couple because I genuinely mean a couple, and no, it's through no choice of my own. It's because I say so much. Let's use their terminology, radical stuff. Like, I don't know, you shouldn't have to pay to have healthcare. It should kind of just be given to you. Healthcare should be a human right. You shouldn't have
a minimum charge, like we do in here in Canada. Yeah. You pay a little bit every month, and everything's fucking covered.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's the way it should be, but apparently that makes me a radical Stalinist that is just wants to like nationalize everything, not just a couple of things that I view that I view as necessities, but I hold these radical views according to them, and they just don't want to associate with me because my logic and reason might rub off on them, and it might cause them to think about things. I don't know.
Actually, before we went live, I was flipping through Twitter, and I just saw one of Bionic Dance's posts with the shirt she was wearing. It says healthcare across it, but in the middle where the T, H, and C are, it's of course green with a little pot leaf above it.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
And there's, like, I remember back in 2000, I know this is a little bit off topic, but I remember back in 2016, because of this, I just assumed that, like, I obviously knew that we still have horrible race relations here. Like, the Ku Klux Klan still exists.
Not just there. We have it here, too.
And it's just...
some places.
And I just thought, like, I accepted that as an unfortunate reality. I just didn't know that there were so many people that, like, I hold to the notion that there's explicit racism.
That's for you, by the way.
Thanks. Explicit racism and implicit racism. And you can be implicitly racist. That's a thing that can happen without saying... you could be racist without agreeing with slavery, for example. And people just don't understand that. And I didn't realize how many people just don't understand that until November 8th, 2016, unfortunately. But going back, when I came across this passage in the Bible, I was like, well, how could this, if it's inerrant, meaning it's never wrong, how could it be wrong on this? And if it's wrong on this, what else is it wrong about?
Yeah. And well, we now know that so much of it is actually demonstrably wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And it was at this point where I was just, I continued reading it, but I read it much more attentively and actually thought about what it was actually saying. and not trying to read it through the lens of a Catholic or a Christian, but trying to read it through an objective lens with someone with no prior preconceptions.
It's tough to do, man. Tough.
Yeah. And I read through it and I made a list of all the things that I had problems with. And I went to the priest at the church that I was going to at the time. And I talked to him about it. And again, he just tried to just explain it away with God works in mysterious ways. He didn't really give me an answer to the whole slavery thing.
Doesn't have to if he uses that line.
Yeah, he kind of just gave me the whole God works in mysterious ways and moved past that. And then he tried to give interpretations to other things that just, to me, seemed so far removed from what at least the translation that I was using could possibly have meant in the words that it chose. So either the translation is wrong, and the original is true, or both are false. And this is when I started to explore. This was about when I got into freshman year of high school. And it was at this point that I had talked to the priest, and then I had reread the Bible again after that. And after that, I couldn't reconcile anything. And as logical fallacies say, just because, places in the Bible are true doesn't mean Jesus actually turned water into wine. Doesn't mean God created Adam and Eve. Doesn't mean he created the earth and the stars and the heavens and everything in 6 days.
6 days.
Yeah. Doesn't mean any of that. So what that these places were real? That doesn't mean anything else is true in it.
That's right. That's right. And he should have turned to shit in a beer. I'm a beer guy. Like, what the hell, Jesus?
Yeah, exactly. And
or as we were saying earlier, a good single malt scotch would have been better.
Exactly. That's more my speed. That's definitely more my speed.
Yeah, I like you already.
Thank you. And it was after that I started calling myself an agnostic first, because I was going to but I held all the beliefs of what atheism is, which is I'm not convinced that this or any other God exists. I'm open to be proven that it exists.
Sure.
I
just unconvinced so far.
I'm unconvinced. Yeah. And I was going to a Catholic high school because, despite knowing this, despite holding these beliefs, I had the choice of where I wanted to go to high school. I could have gone to the public school. I could have gone to, or I could have go to a private school. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the only few non-sectarian private schools where I lived, I don't live there anymore, were, let's just say that for high school, if you're going to commute there, it was more expensive than the tuition per year at my college.
Whoa, what? Really?
Yeah. That being said, it's one of the best high schools in the country. George School or Princeton Prep, if anyone is familiar with those. So my family isn't rich. So I valued my education. I still went to a college preparatory high school, and in all reality, it wasn't that focused on religion. It was just basically associated with the Archdiocese of Trenton, New Jersey, to lower the tuition for people to get a good education. Pretty much all of the teachers that I had were atheists or agnostics, besides the religion teachers. more or less. Like pretty much all of them had master's degrees or PhDs and whatever it is that they're teaching. My history teacher had his law degree and a master's degree in history. So it's not like I decided to go to this. I was forced to go to this school. And I remember sitting and throughout high school, I kept reading philosophy. I kept reading, I read Bertrand Russell. I read Kant. I read Hume, Nietzsche, Spinoza. Obviously, I read pretty much every book Hitchens wrote, pretty much every book Dawkins wrote. I actually physically read The Origin of Species, and I was thinking more and more. It was at this time that I realized what I was struggling with earlier was the problem of evil. I thought about that more. And I thought about it was in my sophomore year of high school that I decided to drop the agnostic title and just accept that I'm an atheist. And I pretty much did that because I wanted to be honest with myself and what I believed, and still do to this day, is that atheism and agnosticism are two different answers to two different questions. Gnosticism revolving around knowledge, theism revolving around whether you belong to a theology or not.
Of all the books that you read, which one would you say would be your favorite? That's a question from Sunny Secular, by the way.
Out of all the books that I read, which one would be my favorite? Probably either. I'm really bad at picking favorites because
I know, me too.
It stresses me out because I sit there and I analyze the pros, the cons, what I liked, what I didn't like of every book that I've ever read. But I think the two that I always recommend to, especially for people that are looking to just be exposed to the arguments, is either God Delusion by Dawkins or God is Not Great by...
Or this one, Fantastic Fallacies, and where they're from.
Exactly.
The guy that's in the chat, David Worley, right there.
I actually haven't read that one, but I'll definitely pick it up.
Not very much reading to it.
Yeah.
It's basically like a layout of the different fallacies. So.
Yeah. I will say a book that I read over the summer that is really great is The Founding Myth by Andrew Seidel. He's an attorney for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And basically, if anyone isn't familiar with it, it basically just takes you through the history of the establishing of this country, the philosophy behind this country, and just kind of systematically dismantles the idea that this is a country based on Christian principles. That's pretty much what it is. And it's extremely well written. As I care about citations in terms of that kind of stuff. It's very well cited.
Oh yeah, it's good.
So
like, this much of the book is citations.
yeah. It's so much citations, but it's a really great book and it's really interesting. That's another one that I'd have to put on my list of favorites.
It's among my favorites of some of the books I've read recently too.
Yeah. Another good one, though it's not really about atheism per se. It's about homosexuality in the Catholic Church, which is called In the Closet of the Vatican. And basically I'm pretty sure he's a French reporter. He talked to a bunch of bishops, cardinals, and found out that pretty much all the, at least the majority of the high-ranking people in the Catholic Church are actually homosexual. Sometimes they often engage in relationships with one another too. So as someone from the Catholic Church who was taught that, if a man lie with another man as he does with a woman, he shall surely be put to death. Obviously not the put to death part, but that homosexuality is bad because of that particular passage. I found that interesting. And I read this book also over the summer, and I have long been an atheist since then, so it's not really something that made me question it. It just made me go, classic hypocrisy, pretty much.
Mhm.
Um, so those are probably a list of my favorites with books that I've read so far.
All right.
So sophomore year of high school was when I decided to drop and just call myself an atheist, and that's when I started to advocate, at least among my friends, that there's a difference between atheism and agnosticism. That
Sure. Yeah.
I at least would argue that everyone is an agnostic, whether you want to admit it or not, because we can't really know whether it's true.
What? The
You
Bible or God?
can sorry, God, whether God exists or doesn't exist. I don't think at this time we don't know anything about it. All that we know is what logic tells us, and at least in my estimation, what we get from logic is that he probably doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. The evidence is pretty much stacked against the existence of deities. So
Yeah.
if you say, let's follow where the evidence goes,
Yeah.
then I'm going to say, yeah, you know what? There's probably no deities out there at all of any kind.
Yeah. I now I would say that I'm probably a positive atheist, that I am convinced that God doesn't exist
Mhm.
at this point in time. Obviously, that could be changed with the right evidence, but at this
Sure.
point in time, that's at least what I'm convinced of. Um, but at this time, I still was. It's very important to me to be honest with myself about what I think, what I believe, and so becoming an atheist, or at least I say becoming, but all I did was change the word that I identified as, um, was important to me. Though at this time I was still struggling because I was still pretty much working on applying the skepticism that I applied to religion, and the skepticism that I applied to everything else in my life, to religion and my beliefs and all of that. And it's still, as someone who, I don't think I was the most indoctrinated, because I started to have these questions at a relatively early age.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but it was still a shock to me because literally all of my family are very religious. My aunts from my father's side pretty much exclusively live at their Catholic church. They have never been married. They still live with each other in the house where they grew up in. They've been going to the same church for probably their whole entire life, unless it changed names. But, and like, they are there every day. They do work with the priest. The church pays for vacations for them to go, experience stuff over in the Vatican. And the church is their life, pretty much. Um, my parents, they don't really go to church that much anymore. I'm not entirely sure why, but they do still fervently believe that there is a God, that the soul exists, and all of the assorted beliefs that typically come with it. Um, so I still very much felt like an outsider. Um, and it wasn't really until I got to college where I started meeting more atheists or religious nons, um, where I started to feel more comfortable, because my church, my not my church, my high school had a monthly mass that everyone had to attend to, that everyone had to attend. Um, while the degrees of religiosity of the people at the school varied, pretty much all of them were Christian or Catholic. There were some Muslims, some Hindus. There were a couple of people who identified as Jewish. There was one Mormon girl in my class. My class meaning the group of people with whom I graduated. Yeah. So all throughout high school, I pretty much just there was one class in high school that really stands out as where I pretty much got to vent all of my problems with the Catholic Church.
Wow.
And it was the teacher didn't really appreciate it, but some of the class did. And I know this because after the class, they always told me, after the class year was over, I was told that it made them think about things that they had never thought about before. I haven't really talked to them since, but it was nice to know that it got people thinking, at least. And it was my junior year of high school, and the class was the moral teachings of Christ. It was moral teachings and morality of Christ is what the class was called.
Okay.
And obviously, what we covered in the class was pretty self-explanatory. Basically, the morality that the Catholic Church wanted the teacher to teach was what was taught to us in the class. And I was never disrespectful. I always, went about the typical method of participation in a high school class: raise your hand, wait to be called on. And I was always called on, despite whatever every time I had to say resulted in the teacher getting visibly frustrated with me, because I would just pretty much just argue her back into a corner by pointing out the contradictions in what she's saying. Like, pretty much the Catholic Church teaches that if you're homosexual, you go to hell. But she then also says that it's okay to be homosexual, which, I mean,
not according to the book.
Yeah, and then I would, cite the book, and she would just argue with me, and there were a number of times that I got myself kicked out of class just because she got frustrated. But that,
damn it, with all these fucking important questions that I can't answer.
Yeah, it's just all I wanted was people to think. And so my senior year was just more exploring philosophy and just thinking about my own beliefs more. And then I got to college, and this was when I started to become a positive atheist, or a hard atheist. I went to Penn State. It's a sweatshirt that I'm wearing. It's a interesting place to go, but there was a atheist and agnostic club that,
Really?
yeah, so I joined, and I started to meet and interact with people, and it was nice to meet people that thought like me, that had expressed some of the same problems, maybe not necessarily the same experiences, and we obviously didn't all go along the same journey to becoming an atheist, but some were, newer atheists that, just became, and by newer I mean just became atheists, that year or whatever.
Just found their way free, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just like reading all of these books, it was nice to know that people were out there that thought like I did. And obviously, all throughout high school, I was always watching the Atheist Experience pretty much every week, and I would binge watch it during the week to just to see that there were more people than me. It was nice to at least feel like I could share the same room with people that thought and believed like I did. But in the club and college, it was very nice to actually get to experience physically, meet people, shake their hands, talk to them, engage with them more than just typing in a chat or um, watching old videos of them just talking with religious people. Um, and then while I was in college, I I'd done a couple of debates. One with the no, it was two with the uh, Agnostic Atheist Club, where we debated a more I don't want to use the word liberal, but a less conservative version of a Christian group, and then another one with a basically what would be a creationist young earth kind of religious club at the university. um, I was on the debate team for those two, the two-person debate team, and then I did a debate as part of the Penn State College Democrats against, unsurprisingly, the Penn State College Republicans. I did that 3 times, and that's when I really began to enjoy the back and forth. I'd always enjoyed arguing. I used to, one of my good friends growing up, and still to this day, we just would pretty much argue for fun. Pretty much take stances that we don't necessarily agree with, just for the sake of arguing. And
It's good practice, actually.
yeah.
I would
And
say if you want to become a better debater, always argue the side you're arguing against.
yep. And this led me to also join the debate club at Penn State. I didn't have much time to actually do it, but I at least participated in what I could, and mostly I helped with debate prep, just kind of arguing with the people that I was helping prep for the debate, just kind of taking the other side of the side that they're assigned to argue, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And then, unfortunately, when I was in law school, there wasn't any kind of there was like a Christian law society type of thing. And at this time, I've already been an atheist, and I've found myself out of my faith and had begun wanting to help other people find their way out of faith. And if I don't help them find their way out of faith, at least don't be so, I don't want to use the word gullible. That sounds kind of insulting, but
Easily accepting of this
don't be
information.
so credulous. At least question.
Yeah, credulous.
At least just think and have reasons other than, well, I believe it because the Bible says so. I believe the Bible because it's God's word. I know it's God's word because the Bible says so. And just that whole circular reasoning, just have something more than that and something that's intelligible. Doesn't have to be 100% correct. Just show me that you put at least some thought into what you're saying to me that you believe. And then when I got to law school, there was no atheist law society or anything like that. Unfortunately, there was a Christian law society, there was a Jewish law society, there was a Muslim law society, but no atheist law society.
Time to start one.
I thought about that, but I didn't have time. I wanted to very much. I wanted to join the video game law society that existed at my school, but I didn't.
Not a lot of work going on in that society. So.
Yeah, no. That was, from what I told, they pretty much just go talk about video games, talk about maybe some law that affects it, and then they just kind of go about their day, pretty much. What I was a member of was the American Constitution Society, which, for anyone who doesn't know, there's two main societies. There's the Federalist Society, and then there's the ACS, the American Constitutional Society. The Federalist Society is more what you imagine a Republican. Think Antonin Scalia. Think Trump's newest appointee, Amy Coney Barrett. Think Neil Gorsuch. Think Brett Kavanaugh. When you think American Constitution Society, think Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Think Earl Warren. More liberal kind of, let's adopt the document to fit the current times, like it was intended, like it was supposed to be. Whereas the Federal Society is more, no, it says this, and this is what they meant back in 1801 when they made this law, back in 1776, or what have you, and that's what it has to mean today. And if you don't like it, then amend the Constitution or just deal with it. I was a part of the ACS because I think that that's the way it should be, because there's evidence to support this way. But because of that and all the other work that I had, I unfortunately didn't have time to create an atheist law society, unfortunately.
That's too bad.
But I did have some interesting I did have in-class debates with the more religious classmates when we would talk about separation of church and state, when we would talk about Roe v. Wade, Obergefell versus Hodges, Masterpiece Cake Shop, those more abortion rights cases, LGBTQ plus rights cases, and separation of church and state free practice clauses. So I did get some time to engage in this back and forth, at least in some even less formal setting, because it's not exactly a debate, but it was kind of like a debate, because at least the teacher was there to proctor, and my professor would pretty much just let the discussion go back and forth pretty much until we started repeating the same things over and over again, or we had to move on to cover whatever else was in the reading for that particular day or week. And that was, now I graduated law school, and now I'm a master's student in philosophy, hoping to be a PhD student in a year and a half in philosophy. I want to do philosophy of religion, or epistemology, logic, or ethics, or all of the above.
All of the above.
There's a lot of overlap between those.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say they're all kind of interconnected anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that actually sounds like it might be a lot of really interesting to do, for sure. Take all these courses. And
yeah.
I mean, did you get? You said earlier you got some. What was the degree you got for law?
Just a Juris Doctorate degree.
Okay.
So I know in most countries, I'm pretty sure it's the same way it is in Canada, you get your law degree as kind of like your undergraduate degree. Whereas here in the States, you have to get a bachelor's degree, and then you have to get a law degree. And your law degree is a Juris Doctorate. So I got my bachelor's degree as a BS in political science, and I got my law degree. And you can get certifications at some law schools. I decided to not go that route. So I just have just a standard Juris Doctorate, just standard JD law degree.
Okay.
But
very
it
cool.
was definitely very, very interesting to take all the courses that I took. I took a lot of privacy related courses, a lot of constitutional law related courses while I was in law school. If I did practice law, that would be kind of the areas that I'd be interested in.
Cool. Very cool.
Mhm.
Now, there's been some questions that have popped up in the chat that I haven't popped up on the screen like I was doing a little bit earlier, but Harmonica wanted to know what kind of rebel music influenced you, if any.
I don't know if you'd really call it rebel music, but I am as someone who grew up at the time that I did, punk rock like Green Day, Blink 182, all the whole kind of, I guess,
The post-punk stuff.
emo, grunge kind of stuff. And around, when would I say? Maybe 7th grade or so. Because growing up, my older brother loved Metallica, loved Megadeth, loved Iron Maiden, Slayer. I grew up loving those bands.
Yep.
And those Metallica specifically was one of the bands that encouraged me to learn how to play guitar. And I actually have my 2 guitars right over there in the corner. Still packed up, but I brought them with me because I can't go without them. But I eventually started listening to more heavy metal, and just all kinds of metal. I listen to pretty much if there's a type of metal, I listen to it.
You've dabbled.
It might not be my favorite, but I at least listen to it. Like my wife, she's obsessed with this band called Ailstorm, which fits under the subcategory of
Hailstorm,
metal. Not Hailstorm, Ailstorm.
Oh.
And they fit under the banner of pirate metal.
Sweet. That's what I'm going to call our band. I think some form of pirate metal.
That's awesome.
I've been told I look like a pirate. So
I could see it. I could see it with the long hair and the bandana. I could definitely see the pirate for sure.
A little kid at Disneyland asked me if I worked on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride.
I
was like, "Yar, I might be there." Like, by the way, have you seen me, parrot? He flew around here somewhere. He's like, "Mom, he's a pirate."
That's adorable. It's adorable. Pirates of the Caribbean ride's probably one of my favorite rides at Disney World.
Unless you're on it and it gets stuck for an hour, like ours did.
Yes, then it's probably not so fun.
Well, it's amusing because they had a little kid in the back of that one too, and we were playing little pirate games with each other. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, that is funny.
His mom's like, "Oh, you're so nice and fun for the kids." I'm like, "Well, I don't have any, so I got to play with some kids somewhere, I guess, at some point."
You have to live vicariously.
Don't take that long. Yeah, that's better. That's a better way of putting it. Yeah. It's like, really? Play with kids, Neil? Come on, buddy. It's not like that, people. The idiot wanted to know, did they teach you what Nittany is or why a lion would want to be it? I don't even know what that means.
A Nittany, because Penn State Nittany Lion.
Oh.
No, actually, that's not part of the Penn State indoctrination. All you get is the "We Are Penn State" chant. You say it 3 times, and then after the 3rd time, the person who initiated it yells back, "Thank you," and then the person who's saying Penn State says, "You're welcome." And I remember, I'm not a huge sports person, so I committed a very heathenous act while I was at Penn State, and I never went to any of the football games, not once. But I do remember going downtown because it was always entertaining to go to bars during home games. Not for the sports, but to see the people get all riled up and do stupid stuff.
Of course.
So I would go down there with my friends, and the bus ride downtown would just be just the chant over and over again. And I felt so bad for the bus drivers having to drive these drunk off their ass college kids downtown for 20 minutes. I felt so bad for them, but every once in a while you'd see the bus driver just kind of laughing along, and even a couple of times I saw the bus driver chanting along. So a couple of the bus drivers had a good time with it, at least.
I'm sure. This one's from Rachel. What was it like going to school where most students thought you should be eternally punished?
It was It was interesting. Whether I don't know if you can hear the dog barking.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's perfectly fine. Animals are always welcome here.
Yeah. You can, as long as they're not going too crazy, you can let them in. My
Oh, and
wife put them out in the other room because they were going crazy. But it was interesting. I definitely had some interesting conversations with people. Let me put this. I never let it bother me because at this time I didn't believe hell existed. So you think I need to be eternally punished? Okay, like you just think I'm a bad person. Got it. I just never really let that bother me. But there were actually a couple of people that were more progressive than the church at this time, who thought that, well, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're an atheist or Christian or Hindu or Muslim, and as long as you're a good person, you're going to go to heaven. So there were those people, which was honestly a breath of fresh air from the other conversations that I was having. Like, my school being, because we were in New Jersey, we're not that far from Washington, D.C. So every year they would have a bus ride of all students who wanted to go to DC for the march. What is it called? March of Life, March for Life. I think it's March for Life. Pretty much just a bunch of pro life people go and they just walk on the Capitol, say their little chant, and then disperse for the day. I was always I still am pro-choice. I don't think it's really my say, but
that's right, because it's not.
Exactly. I'm not the one that has to have the baby.
That's right.
So I shouldn't have a say. And even regardless as to my stance on whether abortion is right or wrong, it should still be available for the woman to make a choice.
It's not that it's right or wrong anyways. It's an
Exactly.
I always, being an adoptee, I often think that I could have been aborted and I wouldn't even be here talking to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I always try to encourage that if they can go to fruition, to give the little one up for adoption. But if it's out of the question and there's just no possible way that can happen, then obviously they got to take that option, right?
Exactly. No, I agree with you 100%. Actually, your stance is precisely my stance. I'm not adopted, but I've had friends that have been adopted, and that has made me think more and develop the stance that I have now. Because obviously at the time I was pro-life because that's what I was told I had to be if I wanted to go to heaven when I was younger. And for my stance, if it should just be an option, I was called a baby killer. And I was just like, I've done nothing wrong. That was that out of all the things that I've been called for holding my views, that's the thing that bothers me the most. Is it that it comes from people who typically vote for a particular party that wants to force you to have the baby, but then when you can't pay for the baby says, well, you shouldn't have had the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Or doesn't want to give you the health care to take that baby to the doctors or to help feed the baby or any of this. They just want to force you to have the baby. Oh, and also the party that says they're pro-life but then is pro-capital punishment and all the other contradicting stances that particular party has. So it's being called a baby.
They're not pro-life. They're pro-birth.
Yeah, exactly.
Once it's out of the hole, so to speak, they don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah, I forget what comedian said it, but there was a comedian that said honestly, it was probably Bill Maher, said that the Republican Party doesn't give a shit about you after you're born and before the age of 18 when you could enlist in the military. during that time, during those 18 years, they don't care one little bit about you.
That's right.
They care about you for the 9 months that you're basically a hodgepodge of cells in a petri dish, and then they care about you if and only if you will enlist in the military, and then after that they don't really care until never, unless you're rich. And I always argued that they weren't. I wouldn't say, while they are pro-birth, I always argued that it makes no sense to call you pro-life. It makes more sense to call you anti-choice.
Yeah.
And when I found out that irritated them as much as being called a baby killer irritated me, I started to refer to them as anti-choice rather than pro-life.
Good for you.
Yeah, because I've been called so many things for my beliefs on religion, my political beliefs. I'm pretty far left. If you have an idea of the political spectrum on a negative 10-point to 10-point scale of about a -4 in terms of state control kind of thing, that gives you an idea of where I land on the right-left side of spectrum. I've been called, but the one thing that bothers me, you could tell me that I'm going to burn in hell. Hell doesn't exist, so why should I care?
Yeah. It's okay. I've got suntan lotion. I'll be fine.
Yeah. And, if I'm going to hell, that must mean that I did something wrong. And if the devil is someone who does stuff wrong, then I should be friends with him because we do similar activities then. So why would he punish
shit once in a while?
Yeah.
Well, don't worry. You're talking about a deity who's apparently, according to the scriptures, especially in Muslim scriptures or Islamic scriptures, he is ultimately merciful.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what's the word? Like, fuck. Huh?
Benevolent?
No. Merciful is the word, but he's what do you call it? Google.
Infinite?
That's the word. Infinitely merciful. Yes. Yet he's just, which is like, what?
Yeah.
You can't be just and infinitely merciful. It does not work that way.
Yeah.
Fuck, even Dan Barker said that in his book.
Yeah.
When he was talking about that.
Yep. So I guess going back to the question, it didn't really bother me per se, at least the thinking that I should be eternally punished for my heathenist beliefs.
Infinite punishment for finite crimes, like we were saying earlier. That's not just either. Like, what?
Nope. That's probably the definition of unjust. To me.
I mean, if he's real, let's just say, like, I'll even go out on a limb and say, okay, maybe he is real. He's still a dick.
Exactly.
Still a fucking asshole.
Yeah, I always said that if there is a God, then he should be seeking my forgiveness.
Yep.
Not the other way around.
Exactly.
Because if he exists, he's a dick, and I don't want to worship him.
Yep. Nope. Even if he was real, he's definitely not worth worshiping.
Yeah, exactly.
And he seems to have, again, if he is real, he seems to have pulled the wool over a lot of people's eyes.
Yep. So if he does exist, he still has all the work ahead of him to get me to even care about worshiping him.
If he does exist, he can have a whole fucking bouquet of those. Here you go, motherfucker.
Exactly.
Well, Mike, I think we've gone past the hour. We're like almost 10 minutes past the hour.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't apologize, man. It happens.
Okay.
It happens. Conversations are good. We just keep going until I feel like, you know what, we can probably talk the rest of this, I think, in an after party, because we didn't even touch on gaming, and I was gonna, but we can do that in the after party. So all you guys in the chat, if you're interested a little bit about the gaming stuff, because Mike is a gamer, and he does have a Twitch channel, which is linked down below. The after party is also linked down below, which I never remember to mention. And we're going to do that. So if you guys would like to join us in an after party, I've always got lots of room in these after parties now because I can have up to 10 people, like the good old Google days when they had the Hangouts.
Yeah.
You're welcome to join us. You just give me a message on Twitter or Facebook, and I'll send you a link, and you can hop in here with Mike and myself and talk about a little bit more about all kinds of cool stuff. And I want to thank all my wonderful patrons. You guys are amazing. It's because of you that this show keeps going. I can upgrade all my equipment, and more stuff is coming. Oh, actually, what my friend Gorilla got me a little something off my wish list that I haven't shown anyone yet, I don't think. I may have showed it once, but it's a little hard case for the Yeti microphone. So when I go on the road, like to Faithless Forum or to like Skepticon or something like that, and do some talking there, I can put my mic in a nice secure case now. And I'm getting the little rubber things, or not rubber, little foamy things. Put a little rubber thing on the end of his cook. They put little foamy things on my microphone so that it'll reduce the no, that shit.
Pop filter.
Yeah, pop filter. That's what they're called. And I even use them at the studio too when I record my vocals for the band and stuff. So, but yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to jump in the after party. And guys, with this whole COVID-19 thing going around, first of all, wash your hands and wear a fucking mask. It's really not that hard. You can cut down the spread by doing so. It has been proven.
Preach it.
And remember to be safe and be well. And above all, be kind. And like I always say at the end of these things, first of all, Mike, thank you very much for joining me for this interview. Pleasure chatting with you.
Having me.
My pleasure, my friend. And like I always say at the end of these things, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.